impactful thing I want to share about Shoshana is that when I let it be known that I was dedicating tonight's learning to Shoshana, I received so many messages from people saying, I knew Shoshana, I was so close to her. Oh, she was such a good friend. And I think that that is a very important thing, that so many people counted her as their friend. And that's something that we can all emulate, being a good friend to people. We're going to, again, everything, our learning together is in the merit of her neshama. Should be an aliyah for her neshama. But in addition to that, all of our learning tonight should be, if everyone could just take a minute to pray, to daven for the safety of those in Eretz Israel, and also for the healing of so many people that need healing right now. So everyone just take a moment to say a tefillah. Here we are on the verge of Rosh Chodesh, the month of Sivan. And when we've been counting the Omer, and when somebody's counting towards something they're looking forward to, they usually count down 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. I kept looking at my watch, counting the minutes. But here we're counting up towards the giving of the Torah. And we have to remind ourselves that the giving of the Torah is not just an event that happened, but an event that reoccurs every year. We reenact the event. And our learning tonight is going to help us with our own personal receiving of the Torah. Part of the preparation is being able to re-receive the Torah. So let's take all the wisdom that women are sharing with us tonight and help us to create a vessel to actually receive the Torah on Shavuos. All right, we're going to get ready to introduce our speakers. The Spiritual Spa Shavuos program has been going on for almost 2 decades, where we take a subject and we divide it between real people to speak on that subject. And by the end of the evening, we learn something. So usually it's the tail end of Yom Tov, when everyone's too full of cheesecake and everyone's feeling overtired. And we have an opportunity to leave Yom Tov filled up with Torah. We moved it virtually last year, and this year we're doing the same. I'm quite excited because our speakers this year are not necessarily professional educators. They may be people that occasionally will give a class, but they're not professional educators. They are doing something else in their life. And I think that's a really important message to all of us, because Torah is something that belongs to each of us. And we all have an opportunity to try to understand it and to live by her wisdom. Our first speaker tonight, with a South African accent, is Gina Cowan. And Gina is going to be talking about the names in the book of Ruth, explaining the different characters as we get to know them. Gina is actually, I could talk for a long time about Gina. I'm just going to share one little bit about her, in that Gina has brought to London a very special quality from South Africa, which is the characteristic of just giving and caring about people. The chesed in their home is tremendous. And again, you ask a busy person to do something, those are the ones that say yes. So on to you, Gina.
Thanks, that's very kind of you. Okay, I know we've got very little time and there's so much to cover tonight, so I'm just going to go straight into it. The story of Ruth is just one of the most beautiful stories. It's one of my favorites, and its author is said to be King Solomon. He certainly knew all the literary devices that are used today to draw in a reader and to create a really exciting read. Just like J.K. Rowling in her Harry Potter stories, Lahavdil, the names in the Book of Ruth have been carefully chosen or ordained to tell us a lot about the characters. The potential loss of name or threat of erasure of a family name is very central to the Megillah of Ruth. And it's a major theme throughout the book is names, the continuation of names, it's linked to the land and the lineage. Judaism actually places great importance on names. A name is our channel that by which life reaches us from above. And in fact, the Kabbalists have said that when a parent names a child the night before the day of the naming, they actually experience a minor prophecy or divine inspiration, such that the child's destiny is actually like wrapped up in the Hebrew letters that make up his or her name. So the Megillah starts with us hearing about this famine in the land of Bethlehem and the move of a man with his family to the land of Moab. Now, Bethlehem is Beit Lechem, the house of bread, and the house of bread is experiencing a famine. How ironic. The very name implies that there should be plenty of bread. And they moved to a place called Moab, which is Me'av, from father, which is a constant reminder of the incestuous origin of this nation. Moab being the son that was born of a relationship between Lot and his youngest daughter. So the very name Moab reminds us of how this nation began. And this is the nation that we're forbidden to seek peace or prosperity all our days forever. In Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 4 to 7, it says, because they met you not with bread and with water in their way when you came out of Egypt. So the very beginning of this book, we're presented with this paradox of a family from Bethlehem leaving the house of bread, go to a nation that didn't give us bread. We are then introduced to the family, and it's interesting to notice the emphasis on the names in the introduction. The Megillah could very easily have said the man's name was Elimelech, his wife was Naomi, and his two sons were Machlon and Kilon. But the emphasis is on the names as well. It says the name of the man was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi, and his two sons were named Machlon and Kilon, thereby emphasizing the word names. And interestingly, the Hebrew word for name is Shem, which has a gematria of 340, which fascinatingly enough has the exact same equivalent of the gematria with the word Sefer, meaning book. And we know that words that have the same gematria are intrinsically related. So every name is like a book waiting to be read and understood. So Elimelech is the first person that's introduced to us. And he's actually introduced to us as an Ish, a man who went from Bethlehem. And the term Ish is usually used to denote somebody of substance, a person of property, a man of stature, a leader. And his name, Elimelech, means my God is king. And the Midrash explains that this appears to be a really appropriate name given to a child during the time of the Judges, because several times during the book of Judges, it says, in those days, there was no king in Israel. Each man did what was right in his eyes. So Elimelech's name actually suggests that a king isn't needed and that Hashem is our king. And it seems like a name that was indicative of faith and hope that Israel would be reinstated to its former glory and people would actually mend their ways. Rashi doesn't inform us of the rest of the story, because it isn't quite the same. He says that Elimelech was one of the richest men alive at the time. And when the famine broke out in Bethlehem, he chose not to assist his fellow man. And in order to avoid being constantly harassed by poor people knocking at his door asking for food, he actually fled to Moab. And so not only has Elimelech demonstrated that he showed a lack of concern for his fellow man, but he also showed a lack of concern for his own family by placing his children in the immoral society of Moab. In Ruth Rabbah, Midrash Lekach Tov, it says that the man's name was Elimelech. To me, Eli will come Malchut, the kingship. And in Divrei Yamim, we are told that Elimelech is from the lineage of kings. He was actually the direct descendant of Nachshon. So here, the literal translation of his name is actually distorted, implying that Elimelech actually doesn't deserve kingship. He's a man who regards the kingship as something destined to serve his own needs, as someone who thinks he's deserving of kingship just because of his birthright. And the Midrash explains that Elimelech actually disappears from the story because he's not worthy of kingship. And he could not be part of the destiny of kingship that actually produces the Davidic dynasty. And so he's disqualified and actually removed from the Megillah. We are then introduced to Naomi. She is the wife, and her name is Noam, which means pleasant, and her actions are pleasant and beautiful. She's initially seen as a follower in that she went with her husband. He decided to go and she went with. And interestingly, later on in the story, when she returns to Bethlehem, she asks the woman to no longer call her Naomi, but rather Mara, bitter, because the Lord dealt bitterly with her and she has returned empty-handed. I haven't got time to go into it tonight, but it's quite interesting that she does two things. She changes her name and she changes her place, which are two distinctive acts that one can do to change their muzzle. But although she asks for her names to be changed, she's still referred to as Naomi from there on in the Megillah. So her name stays Naomi. And there is the understanding that her return to Bethlehem is actually kind of her teshuvah, because she previously had some sort of passive role in that she went with her husband and she remained with her sons, but now she returns in her own way and she's actually returns to her former pleasant ways. Next, we're introduced to the two sons, Machlon and Chilion. And Machlon comes from Nimhu because he was erased, and Chilion comes from Kalu because he was destroyed. Machila is also illness, and Chilion from Kalaya, which means to make an end. And these are both very sterile names, and they're names of no continuity or future. In the Chronicles, it is argued that perhaps these were not the names that Elimelech gave to his sons at birth, and rather that they were called Joash and Saraph, because they gave up hope of divine redemption and they were doomed to be burnt. The next characters are the two daughter-in-laws described as Moabites, Orpah, as she was the closest to the Moabite way of life, and then Ruth. Orpah and Ruth were both Moabite princesses, daughters of King Eglon, son of Balak. Orpah's name comes from Oreth, meaning neck, or the back of the nape of the neck, because she turned her back on her mother-in-law. She left Naomi as Naomi had asked. But the Oreth is actually the part of your neck, the back of your head and the top of your back, the nape of the neck. And this is actually where our reptilian brain resides. It's said to be fully functional from about 6 months in utero. And it's responsible for satisfying our physical needs, such as food, touch, stimulation, material comforts. It also has the same Hebrew letters as the word paro, and the same letters as the word parua, meaning wild. And this shows that when our paro brain dominates, we actually can't bear discomfort, deprivation, or anything uncomfortable. And we insist on getting our desires satisfied now at all costs, even if it means hurting others or indulging in addictive behaviors or abusing our privileges. And it is told that Orpah left Naomi, and that night, after several relations with several men, she actually conceived Goliath, the giant who later fought against David. Then our main character is introduced, that's Ruth, and her name comes from the Hebrew word rayot, meaning friendship. Ruth is also from the same word as Ruvehu. He's satiated, like in Psalm 23, where it says, Kos Ruveha, you anointed my head with oil, my cup is satiated. And this alludes to Ruth, the mother of King David, who satiated Hashem with songs of praise. In Hebrew, Ruth's name is comprised of the letters Resh, Vav, and Taf, and together they have a numerical value of 606. All the human beings have an obligation to observe the Noahide laws, and Ruth, being a Moabite at birth, had these 7 laws. And if you add those 7 commandments to her name, it's 613, the number of commandments in the Torah. And Ruth is the epitome of a convert. I mean, so taking on the Torah and these 613 commandments is Ruth. And that's perhaps one of the reasons why this beautiful book is read on Shavuot, because of the time of the final conversion of the Jewish people as we accepted the Torah at Sinai. And just a few more names just to quickly get through. There's Boaz, which means in the strength of. In his acts actually affect the future generations and lead to the lineage of the Mashiach. he doesn't merely make it possible for Elimelech's name to be reacquired, but he actually restores the whole nation, enabling a future. There's Ploni Almoni, who's the alternate redeemer, and he has a strange name. It means hidden, unnamed, silent. His name's, it's actually generic. It's like a John Doe or a Joe Bloggs. It's a man without a name. And it's significant in that the relative who refuses to uphold the family name is actually rendered nameless and is referred to as Ploni Almoni. The Midrash, interestingly, tells us that he was actually named Tov. His actual name was Tov, meaning good. And he intrinsically was good. He had good prospects, but somehow he failed to see it and he lost his destiny, his relevance, his goodness, and finally he just lost his name. The last name in the story is the baby born to Ruth and Boaz, and that's Ovid. And strangely, Ovid isn't named by his mother or Naomi. He's named by the community. He's named by the woman who helped. And I think the ultimate goal of the Megillah is to restore the family name of Elimelech. And the child who produces this kingship, this Ovid, also removed the threat of annihilation and namelessness which hovers over Elimelech's family and perhaps the whole nation at the time. There's lots to discuss about why the book is called the Book of Ruth and not the Book of Naomi, but that I hope maybe perhaps someone else is covering that. Just to say that the Megillah ends with a list of names suggesting that the birth of this child actually has restored all the links between the generations and provides the nation with hope for the future. So I hope I've covered all the names that are referred to in the Megillah and given you some insight into some of them.
Thank you very much for getting under the skin of the characters. Now we're going to go on. We're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to move to the next speaker because she is in a little bit of a rush because of part of her other life. She is a balanit at one of the mikvahs, so she needs to get there as the sun begins to set here in London. I chose Raquel Wolf, our next speaker, to speak on her topic for a very specific reason. Raquel, before I tell you her topic, is a person also who wears a lot of different hats. She is a star Tarat Mishpacha teacher. She empowers women with the laws of mikveh and marriage guidance. She also is a very proud mother and grandmother, but she's also a really proud mother-in-law. So she's going to be speaking about Ruth and Naomi and the daughter-in-law, mother-in-law, or the mother-in-law, daughter-in-law relationship. Now, why I think this is such an appropriate topic for her is that I think it was 2 years ago at our Shavuos spiritual spa, her daughter-in-law spoke and she met her. It wasn't her daughter-in-law yet. She went over to her house after. And so it was kind of exciting through our spiritual spa event, she actually met her daughter-in-law to be. So on to you now, Raquel.
Wow, what an introduction. I'm looking at all the faces here and I'm going to say, oh my goodness, my mother-in-law is on the screen, my daughter-in-law is on the screen, my other daughter is on the screen, so I really have to behave.
Do they know that you're going to be speaking about being a mother-in-law or daughter-in-law?
I'm sure that they do, but here goes anyway. Now that my computer crashed and I had literally my daughter-in-law and my son running over here with their computer, so this is a real team effort here. So I'm speaking on relationships between mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law. It's a massive responsibility, especially as the dynamics can be so varied. I'm so blessed to have a very special mum-in-law, and exceptional daughters-in-law. So let's stick to Nomi and her daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah. And this year is now dedicated to all the daughters-in-law and mothers-in-law out there, especially remembering my dear colleague, Shoshana Fega Bas Chaim Yitzchak Alei Shalom, an outstanding mother and mother-in-law. We will see how Nomi, being a mother-in-law, with the Hebrew word chamot, can be judged either being warm and loving from the root chama, or cham, which is hot, as a fiery, opinionated, jealous person. Don't decide yet. Let's first study the evidence. At the heart of the first chapter of Ruth, Perek Aleph, Pasuk 8, Chet, there is a well-known dialogue between Nomi and her Moabite daughters-in-law, Ruth and Orpah. Nomi urges them to return to Moab, but they insist on accompanying her in spite of her logical persuasive arguments. Eventually, Orpah gives in and returns to Moab, and as we know, Ruth perseveres and remains with her mum-in-law. Two questions spring to mind, I hear you say. What prompts Ruth and Orpah to accompany their mother-in-law in the first place? And why does Nomi dissuade them from joining her? And those really curious ones out there, this is for a gold star. What was the difference between Orpah and Ruth? What distinguishes the two daughter-in-laws that one returns and the other one keeps on going? So let's look at the intentions of the daughters-in-law. Someone's unmuted themselves. So let's look at the intentions of the daughters-in-law. Why did they accompany Nomi, their mother-in-law? Sorry, someone's not muted. That's better. There was a big noise. Why did they accompany Nomi, their mother-in-law? Nomi gave good reasons for them to go back to Moab, each one to their mother's house. Nomi assumes that it's better for the girls to be with their mother and not with their mother-in-law. We all know that there are so many mother-in-law jokes, right? Okay, there's a young man, he asks his mother if it's okay to bring home a girl for her to meet, you know, for dinner. And the mother is very, very busy, very excited. She sets the table, the best crockery, the best tableware, and she is setting the bar really high to show her daughter-in-law how things are meant to be. The mom is very surprised when the son comes in and he introduces, number one, a blonde bombshell, a polite ginger girl, and a very educated, curly, dark-haired girl. 3, not 1. Wow. He helps the son come after the meal, helps her to clear the table. And then he asked the mum, so, well, which one do you think is the one that I love? And without hesitation, of course, the mum says, it's the ginger one. The son is flabbergasted. How on earth did you know? Well, it's the only one that I can't stand, is what her reply is. So, joking aside, the Ramban states in the law of divorce that there is a halachic assumption that relationships between mother-in-laws and father and daughter-in-laws are characterized by animosity, as spelled out in the Hebrew words, chamoti, chamot. There is a debate as to why Nomi sent them back to their mother's house and not their father's. Don't they have fathers, is the question? Perhaps they had been disowned by their fathers when they married Jewish men. Some midrashim suggest that children from idolatrous homes are considered to have no father, assuming promiscuous behavior. So questionable fatherhood. So perhaps sending a young Moabite woman back to her father to resolve the problem of fertility may be inappropriate, given the story of Lot and his daughters. Another reason being the most appropriate place to await marriage is probably at their mother's house. So quite caring, really. Let's carry on with the why. Nomi actually verbalizes this intention of fertility and then dispels it. Do I yet have sons inside me that they should be for you as husbands? So now Nomi assumes that her daughter-in-laws has self-interest at heart, highlighting the laws of Yibun here, where a man is required to marry where a man is required to marry the widow of his deceased brother if he dies childless, thereby providing an heir to their brother's name and heritage. Evidently, the vulnerability of these two young women left adrift without anyone to provide for them must have been foremost in their minds. So it was very likely that Ruth and Orpah would accompany Nomi back to her hometown, where she would provide them both with husbands from her family. But Nomi makes it crystal clear to them both. She can't guarantee husbands for them. She has no more sons, nor the hope of having any in the future. And if she did, what? They would wait for the boys to be old enough to get married to them? We can only speculate as to the other reasons Nomi doesn't consider other relatives, such as Boaz or the Goel. Perhaps Jewish law didn't stipulate didn't stipulate this relationship as a formal obligation. And remember, there were no phones, no emails, no WhatsApps. So Naomi couldn't find out if they were still alive. And if they were alive, would they marry a Moabite, especially one connected to Elimelech, who had deserted them all in the time of famine and in the time of need? Or finally, did Naomi just simply not want her Moabite daughters-in-law to come with her? You know, time out, put that chapter behind me. It's not my responsibility anymore. The text may indicate that Ruth and Orpah have no specific plan in mind when they set out to accompany Naomi. In fact, the first four verbs which talk of Naomi's return are all in the singular in Pasuk Vov and Zion, referring to only Naomi. The daughters-in-law are mentioned twice as extras, and her daughter-in-law with her. They follow Naomi's actions, but lack any volition of their own. It's only at the end of this description that the verb changes to the plural, showing us that something has changed, and they walked on the road to return to the lands of Yehuda. The Malbim also has doubts. He writes, all of them agreed to depart from this place, for they thought that the fate of the place caused their unfortunate situation of the Elimelech and the sons dying, but only Naomi herself decided to depart from the fields of Moab. It was only after they went on the road and came to the end of the land of Moab, where the path goes to the land of Yehuda, that they, Ruth and Orpah, also decided to return to the land of Yehuda. So according to the Malbim, the daughters-in-law had the goal to leave Moab and its tragedies behind, not necessarily to accompany Naomi. This might be why Naomi, in Pasuk Chet and Tet, she uses very, very gentle words of farewell and thank you. Go return, each woman to the house of her mother. God shall do with you kindness as you did with the dead ones and with me. God shall give you, and you shall find a resting place, each woman in the house of her husband. It seems to Naomi initially that each woman will like this suggestion. There is no great effort to persuade them. Tenderness is used to express appreciation for their kindness in giving the correct burial for her sons Machlon and Chilion. Appreciation and kindness they did for her. Some Mefarshim say that this was them relinquishing their ketuvah. Other Mefarshim say they loved Naomi enough to sit shiva with her and to walk with her on the start of her journey. Maybe this sincere appreciation, softness from their loving mother-in-law actually encourages the girls to stay with them. While it may remain a mystery as to the true intentions of the daughters-in-law, both decide to stay with Naomi. Could it be sentimentality? They can't tear themselves away from their dead husband's mother. And Orpah and Ruth say they want to join their nation, Pasuk Yud, suggesting they want to be part of the Jewish people, even at this early stage. Orpah changes her mind. Again, we don't know why. Some daughters-in-law out there might just say, oh, Ruth was the favorite daughter-in-law. Since we don't know why they went in the first place, we can't say why Orpah turned her back on how sincere the love really was. So why does Naomi send her daughters-in-law away? Why does Naomi put so much effort into convincing her daughter-in-laws to not accompany her back to Bethlehem? If we look at Naomi's motivation, three clear approaches emerge in rabbinical sources. Naomi's compassion for her daughter-in-laws, Naomi's genuine desire that they not accompany her, and Naomi's contrived scenario concocted to prepare for potential conversion. So, chomat, love or fiery? This is still the question. One approach regards Naomi's action as altruistic, stemming from her love and her affection for her daughters-in-law. We can see this from the sincere, heartfelt bracha she gives to them. She calls them benatai, my daughters, treating the daughter-in-laws like her own beloved daughters, sending them home out of concern for their future. As the Midrash Rabbah takes this approach and says, do not my daughters al banatai, which can also mean woe to my daughters, for I am very bitter for you, michem, meaning on your behalf. for the hand of God has gone out against me and against my sons and my husband. The Targum adopts a similar approach, but translates michem not as for, but more than you. So please, my daughters, do not embitter my soul, for it's more bitter for me than you. Nomi feels she has truly been punished by Hashem. She has it worse than them, much worse than them. It's not until Nomi sees that Ruth is truly not going away that we see Nomi's true compassion towards Ruth. As the Medrash Zuta explains, that when Nomi says that Ruth has accepted Nomi's provisions and burdened herself with great crying, her compassion is then aroused and Nomi burdens herself and accepted it. Oh, but wait. Remember I said earlier that Nomi's daughters-in-law were acting in a self-serving manner? This could show that their relationship actually was not so amicable. Let's look at Nomi's final words before Orpah leaves to go back to Moab. For I am very bitter from you, michem, for the hand of Hashem has gone out against me. That's in Pasuk Yud Gimel. So Nomi, mother-in-law, chamot, anger, fiery, is basically blaming Orpah and Ruth. There, she said it. It's out in the open. They are totally responsible for everything. So of course Orpah went back home. 3 translations, michem, for you, more than you, and now because of you, according to the Zohar. The mother-in-law hurls it at them. It's your fault. If they hadn't married Machlon and Chilion, they wouldn't be dead. Maybe Nomi was embarrassed of them too. They were foreign. They were dressed differently. Can you imagine arriving in Bethlehem and everyone coming to welcome Nomi and what? 2 Moabite daughters-in-law with her? Awkward. Nomi, still cold and unfriendly after Ruth declares her loyalty. She doesn't embrace Ruth or say nice warm words with her. But what happens? The mother-in-law has a broigus. She ceased to speak to her. It says it, she ceased to speak with her. Chazal tell us that this was totally deliberate. Vatelachna shetechem, and the 2 of them walked. What, she's still broigus? Same words used in Bereshis when Abraham and Yitzchak are heading to the Akedah, showing obedience. But there is an extra word there, yachdav, together. They still walked together. So we have 2 women silently walking along the dusty path from Moab to Bethlehem in their own thoughts, no chatting, as Nomi grudgingly accepts Ruth's presence. Medrash Rabbah says that they don't even walk together. When the road narrows, they walk separately. They arrive in Bethlehem. Nomi calls her bitter, empty, without a single reference to Ruth. Nobody pays attention to Ruth at all. In Pasuk 19, they say, is that Nomi? Maybe the neighbors ignored Ruth because Nomi didn't do the big introduction and say, hey, everyone, this is my daughter-in-law, Ruth. So maybe we have got Nomi all wrong. Many Midrashim look at the entire scenario of Nomi dissuading her daughters-in-law from accompanying her as a halachic formality, a trial to see if they were really sincerely prepared to join the Jewish nation. This was all a prelude to conversion. Return, my daughters, go. Rav Shmuel ben Nachmani says in the name of Rab Yudan bar Chanina, in 3 places, return, 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 all in the plural. This is parallel to 3 times one pushes away someone who wants to convert in Judaism. If he pushes again, then one accepts him to convert. So Nomi was speaking to both Orpah and Ruth at this time. So not such a heartless mother-in-law, I hear you say. Another Medrash says, return my daughters, as in Shovna, plural, do teshuvah. She's saying to them, do teshuvah, so we can look at the whole first chapter, the foundations to this story completely differently. Nomi loved both Ruth and Orpah so much that she begged them to do teshuvah. Then Nomi pulls away, Orpah returns, and Nomi stops talking to Ruth. Absolutely no broigus here. Nomi is following the legal components of conversion. So we can see 3 different ideas for sides of Nomi here. Three different approaches. Nomi has sincere concern for the well-being of her daughters-in-law. Nomi genuinely doesn't want her daughters-in-law to accompany her, whether out of anger or out of embarrassment. And Nomi is testing the sincerities of her daughters-in-law to facilitate a full conversion. The ambiguities regarding Nomi's incentive for discouraging her daughters-in-law are as striking as the ambiguities of her desire to return to Bethlehem. They confuse us when we try to understand Nomi's character. She's three-dimensional: selfless, warm, family-orientated, caring, or following the true traditions portrayed of that mother-in-law. After arriving in Bethlehem and the introduction of Boaz, we learn that Nomi and Ruth are speaking again. Are these words asking permission from Nomi, or is Ruth voicing her attention? She says nah, saying please or now. Ruth's strong will is coming out once again, showing her mother-in-law her purposeful youth with her belief in doing the right thing, making decisions with clarity, and Ruth taking care of her mother-in-law. Nomi replies, "Go, my daughter." The relationship is much warmer already. The balance is shifting. Ruth is protecting her mother-in-law by going to gather food alone. The relationship changes, warms gradually. Nomi becomes protective of Ruth, motherly, but her instinctive questioning and checking when she comes back from Boaz's field with full arms, that she hadn't slept with him, but Ruth reverted to Moabite ways. There is a transformation in Nomi after a solution comes to play. Her language changes. Ruth becomes the carer for the bitter, depressed Nomi. And now, with hope for the future, Nomi talks of our Redeemer. Ruth is included in these plans, partnership, but even more so as Ruth's mother. She's protecting her. Nomi has new regard for Ruth. Boaz accepts Ruth as part of Yisrael, which enables Nomi to openly, unreservedly, publicly accept Ruth as her family, and Ruth can reciprocate. There is a play on the words, using the words from the first chapter where Nomi is pushing Ruth to go back to Moab, and she again says, "Go, my daughter," and now to show concern and love. Even with the immodest proposal put to Ruth, the language changes from I to you. The Gemara simply says that everything that Ruth does, Nomi will be with her. Her merit will accompany her. The two take courage from one another, a team with a goal, even if reputations were even at stake. When Ruth returns from Boaz, Nomi asks, "Where are you, my daughter?" As close as a daughter? But who are you? Doubts once again materializing from her previous Moabite upbringing. Yet love and kindness return between the two. Meshiv Nefesh, restorer of life. But Ruth turns out to be better than her sons. So back to the mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws being on the same page. Ahav, love and devotion, is only mentioned between Ruth and Nomi, and not between Ruth and Boaz. Ahav is not mentioned between Nomi to Ruth. Nomi's original hesitation certainly has been dismissed and is replaced by appreciation and approval. After the birth of Ruth's son, he is given to Nomi. This shows us the future king, David HaMelech, belonged to the nation and not to the family. And this is the purpose of the Megillah Ruth. The story of continuity. A mother-in-law's desperate to continue her family's name. The story of Tanakh, all the stories in Tanakh often leave a great deal for Rabbonim and Mefarshim to play with, to draw our own conclusion from. So in response to our original question, how do you think the mother and daughter-in-law relationship panned out? Maybe we can take away from this one big lesson, that we have to all work on our relationships. Don't take things at face value. We need to try to understand the why before we go on to judge anyone. And I wish you all a Chag Sameach.
Thank you very much, Raquel. In addition to giving pre-wedding lessons, I think you're going to have to start giving pre-mother-in-law lessons. I think
With
that's a very good idea.
With pleasure.
Very much.
Okay. I want everyone to get their passports ready because we're going to take a trip. And we're also going to try to screen share. Let me just see if I'm able to do this.
Ruthie, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Yeah. Okay, how is that now? All right, you did hear what I said about, okay, I think I must have gone on mute. Fine. So we're gonna try a screen share and I'm gonna need everybody's participation. So you can either write answers in the chat, or I don't mind if you just, when you wanna answer, just unmute yourself and then remute yourself and we'll see how it goes. Charmaine, are you able to get the screen share up? I want everyone to get their passports ready because we all are ready to take this trip. Imagine a small town in the green, beautiful, lush region of Israel. There we are, somewhere between today's Bethlehem, and Efrat. We're going to look at the social problems of a closed community. It's an agricultural town, and it's full of God-fearing people. According to the Tzemach David and the Seder Hadaros, it happened approximately in the year 2787, which is 973 before the Common Era. Okay, now let's take a look at the text. The story of the book of Ruth takes place over 10 years and a few months. We're going to start with the first word, Vayehi. Does everyone see the screen? I guess I'm not going to have everyone unmute. I'm assuming everyone sees the screen share. Okay. Vayehi b'yemei shvot hashoftim. I put it twice in yellow, that same word. Now it came to pass. Now, when we see the word Vayehi, it's kind of like a sigh. Something ominous is about to happen. Let's find out. This took place when? Shvot HaShoftim, during the time of the judges. Okay, I need an answer from somebody. How long a period was the time of the judges? Anyone know? It was approximately 350 years long. Okay, this is after we came out of the wilderness. We had judges, and eventually we appointed kings, which is going to lead us to King David, which is Ruth's progeny, her great-grandson. But this took place during the time of the Shoftim. But interesting, it says Shafot HaShoftim. It's a double usage of the word judge, during the time of the judging of the judges. So it's not a historical there were the best of times and the worst of times. It could be a very tumultuous time, and it could be a very positive time, up and down. So what was going on? So according to some, this was a time where perhaps the judges, their judging was a little bit too strict for the people to handle. But it seems to be the judges were being judged by the people. There was a little bit of a criticism of the leadership. And when there's a criticism of the leadership, there's a breakdown in society. And even a person as great as Elimelech, he may just say, hey, I'm getting out of here right now. Whatever it was, there was the judging of the judges. A little personal lesson. I think it's important to us to remember that we have to be able to show a certain respect to our leadership, but sometimes, what do they say? We get the leadership that we deserve. So this was during a time where the judges were perhaps being judged a little bit too much, or perhaps they were worthy of being judged. Now, what was going on? Now, there are a few reasons that a person is allowed to leave the land of Israel. One of the reasons is because a person can leave Israel if they need livelihood and if there's no food. We saw this with Avraham Avinu. But Avraham went towards food. What Elimelech does is he chooses a place to go, which is away from food. It's interesting. Elimelech was a wealthy man. His job at the time of the famine, you'd think, was to say, I'm going to help you. But he was afraid, if everyone comes knocking at my door, if I see another one of those requests for tzedakah, if my phone rings one more time with somebody asking to fund something, there'll be nothing left when we need it. So I'm just going to go out of town till the famine is over. His decision, well, let's take a look first at that word ish. So as Gina said, when we use the word ish, it connotes somebody of importance. Ish chashuv, a person of stature. But it also is interesting that it doesn't immediately give his name, because it's important to recognize that when Elimelech left, he left incognito, no details. It's very, very different when we hear about Ezra and Nehemiah giving every single detail down to the animal. But here, very little is said. He leaves Beit Lechem, which is really interesting because he leaves, what is that word, the first word in the word Beit? It says, Mi Beit Lechem. We think of Beit Lechem, the place. But Beit, he leaves the house. He leaves the bayit, the house where there's lechem, where there's sustenance. And he goes not just anywhere, but he goes to the Sedei Moav. Take a look in the lilac at the word, I think it's in the lilac. Let me just see, my thing is on the screen. This doesn't want to, oopsie, okay. Does everyone hear me? Because it says my Zoom meeting is not responding. Can everyone hear me?
Hear you perfectly well.
Yeah, okay, good, because it says here, oh, there, maybe it won't. Okay, so when it says, I didn't even highlight the word sedei. Well, if you take a look under the word, does everyone see, it says the lilac says lagor. So he's going just temporarily. Lagor means to sojourn. He's not planning to leave permanently. He's just going on a sojourn temporarily. And where's he going to go? He's going to go to the fields of Moab. He doesn't go to a particular field. He's just going to go from one field to the next. He's not going for a long time. He's going, let's say, on a little bit of a journey, like some people do during COVID. Let's just get out of town till it's over. Now, it's interesting where this wealthy leader of the community decides to go. His choice of destination is Moab. Now, who remembers who Moab was? Anyone want to speak up and tell us a little bit about Moab? The secret of Moab is in his name, Me Abba, from daddy. At the time of the destruction of Sodom, Lot left with his family. His wife looked back. She said, how can I manage without my cleaning lady and without my jag and without my hairdresser? And she looked back longing for the life in Sodom, and she turned into a pillar of salt. And Lot was left with his two daughters. What his two daughters did was what is called an avera l'shem shamayim. They did something wrong because they thought it was something right. They got their father drunk, they both conceived, and one of them called their father quite in your face, Me Abba, from daddy. That is Moab. Moab later on, when we were traveling in the wilderness, something that we think we're only going to be doing on a temporary basis, all of a sudden it can become permanent. This can work negatively, but also can work in the reverse positively. So one of the things that I saw happening now, that's happening because in memory and in the merit of the Kedoshim that sadly and tragically lost their lives, people are being asked to take on something. And I thought to myself, yeah, I could take something on for a little bit. And I'm going to encourage people to take something on for themselves. Do it temporary and see if it becomes permanent. Okay, we're going to stop here. My next speaker is somebody, there are two of our speakers that I've known since they're babies. But this one, I saw her as soon as she was born because it's Yocheved, our daughter. And I'm not going to embarrass her by telling you more about her, but I'm looking forward to hearing her speak. And her topic is the kiss.
Okay, hi everyone, good evening. So just to keep things short, for a minute, let's picture departure scene at an airport terminal. If you can conjure up such a scene from the pre-COVID days when travel was still an option, and will be an option soon, right? People are hugging and kissing and embracing their loved ones. Perhaps a few people are shedding some tears. After all, separations can trigger very deep emotions. And Megillas Ruth, as we know by now, has a goodbye scene of its own, as Raquel so beautifully touched on. Naomi has now heard that famine is over, and she's convinced that it's time to return. She's convinced that Bnei Yisrael have mended their ways, and that's why Hashem has remembered them. And so she's ready to return. Almost 10 years have passed. It's been a sojourn. It was meant to be temporary, but 10 years, it's quite a long sojourn. And she heads off back to Eretz Yehuda, Eretz Yisrael. In these 10 years, she has buried her husband. She's lost all of her wealth. She's watched her two sons assimilate, right, and then marry Moabite princesses. And then she has to mourn their deaths too. So it's been a tragic 10 years for her. Unlike our modern airports, where the goodbye scene has to happen at a very fixed point, you're heading off to security, you're going to say goodbye to your loved ones. Naomi is accompanied by Ruth and Arpa, and they head off together towards Eretz Yehuda. As Raquel touched on, it's unclear whether Naomi was meant to initially be accompanied by Ruth and Arpa, or whether they sort of keep going, until eventually she says, then, okay, guys, go back, enough. I'm on my own now. You go back home, and I'm going to take this further. But what we do see is that there's an embrace and there's a kiss. And Perek Aleph and Pasuk Tes, Naomi encourages them to go back, but Tishak Lohen, and she kisses the two of them. But Tisena Kolon, and they raise their voices in tears, but Tifkena, and they weep. And that's all in the plural. She kisses them, and they return her kisses with weeping. And then she continues to speak to them and discourages them from continuing, telling them there's no chance of her helping them remarry, not from her own children or from any other children. And Pasuk Yadala, we have another scene of kissing. Vatisena kolon, they lift their voice. Vatifkena, and they begin to weep. Ode further. Then Vatishak Arpa lachamusa. Arpa kisses her mother-in-law. V'rus dovka ba. And Ruth, dovka, lidvok is like the Hebrew word devek. Devek is glue. Ruth clings to her mother-in-law. She doesn't want to leave. And so something very interesting going on here. But Tishak Arpa lachamusa, the Mefarshim tell us that Arpa kissed her mother-in-law was a kiss of abandonment. It was a kiss of goodbye, farewell, I'm ready to say goodbye, and my emotions are coming out. She's ready to move onwards. But Ruth refuses to leave. She's sticking like glue to her mother-in-law. She wants to go on further. And of course, Naomi discourages her. And if you have time over Shavuos, I highly recommend you look at the Mefarshim a little bit about their conversation, where Ruth displays her sincerity to Naomi, and eventually she's accepted as a convert joining the Jewish people. The point I want to touch on now, though, is something very interesting that happens in Pasuk Tes Zayin. V'tana Ruth al tifki'i bi la'azveich l'shuv me'acharayich. Ruth says, don't tifki'i bi, don't strike me, don't push me away and make me abandon you, because I want to really stay with you. And the word tifki'i is the shorish that pei gimel ayin, a pei, a gimel, and an ayin, pega. Unfortunately, we know this word from modern Hebrew word pigua. Pigua is when people are lo aleinu, lo alechem, are stricken in a harmful, maybe deathly way. So on a simple level, atifki bila azveich means don't push me away, don't make me leave you. But on a deeper level, Ruth is suggesting that if you make me leave you, you're actually abandoning me, and you're actually almost killing me. And of course, having to leave her mother-in-law isn't her death sentence. But she's suggesting that actually, if I have to leave you now, that's going to be the end of my spiritual journey. And that will be spiritual destruction. Don't strike me in a harmful way, with a mortal blow, because it will be death for me. Because my soul needs to stay with you, needs to stay with the Jewish people. And I think that this is a very important message for us as we approach our own Kabbalas HaTorah, our own acceptance of the Torah, that we have to recognize that if we are not actively and proactively connected to Torah and mitzvos, we are spiritually wounding ourselves. It's tifki'ibi. We are wounding our very essence. A Jew needs to be positively and actively and continuously connected to our Torah source in order to be alive. And our Kabbalas HaTorah needs to include something that will strengthen our connection to Hashem and to Torah and to mitzvahs, because that is our life, that is our essence. And then they go on, and Ruth describes how sincere she is in her desire to join the Jewish people, and how she's willing to accept every single restriction that is part of being a Jew, from the cultural restrictions to the restrictions of who she marries and where she goes to and how she's going to live and how she's going to die. And at that point, in Pasuk Yud Ches, we see that Naomi says, that at this point she sees that Ruth is mitametzes. The shorish that is omet, aleph mem tzadi. Omet means strength. She sees that she is strengthening herself. She is almost struggling inwardly. And at that point, Naomi says, okay, fine, I accept you, but and unlike what Raquel was saying, I'd rather suggest is she stops trying to dissuade her daughter-in-law from joining her, because she sees her sincerity. And I want to point out this word mitametzes. She is struggling. And I like to suggest that Naomi recognizes an inner struggle in her daughter-in-law. And it's because she sees her daughter-in-law struggling inwardly, she's able to accept her. Now, often we look at ourselves and we see struggle as a weakness. You know, I should be better than that. I shouldn't still be shouting at my kids when they come in with mud on their shoes. It shouldn't bother me anymore. I should have grown beyond that. You know, I really shouldn't be thinking that negative thought about a Jew who dresses or acts or behaves differently than me. And we eat ourselves up inside of ourselves because we think we should be better than we are, and we look at ourselves negatively because of this. But actually, it's very different. The struggle is what we're here for. The very fact that Ruth is apparently having an inward struggle, making this momentous decision to join the Jewish people, for Naomi is a reason to accept her as a gera, as a Gores in Am Yisrael. Because the very fact that she is struggling means that she really wants this, and she's really striving in the right direction. I think this is a second message for our own Kabbalas HaTorah, that it's about the struggle. It's about an inward struggle. And the fact that we are continuously struggling and continuously striving in our self-development, that's a symbol of life. That's a symbol of Mitzvah Hashem's success. And so we turn to Shavuos now. It's an opportunity to show our conviction, like Ruth showed her conviction to her mother-in-law. And Mitzvah Hashem, we'll have a wonderful Kabbalas HaTorah. Have a good night. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Yocheved. I'm sending you a kiss of pride. That was a lot for us to learn from.
Thank you, Yocheved.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Yocheved.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next one, and each speaker has something unique to offer. So hold on. Our next speaker comes from Venice, Italy, originally from London. Tal, I can't say, Basali, is that how I say your surname? Basali. Okay.
Sally, that's fine.
Basali, okay, that sounds even more Italian. So Tal is a businesswoman. She's a communications consultant. And I actually, even though she's not a Rebbitzin, I met her at the European Rebbitzin conference, and I was blown away because in her spare time, Tal has put together and runs Zehud Jewish Online School, because there are children throughout Europe that don't have the opportunity to go to a Jewish school until recently, and that is something that Tal provides. It has children from 11 countries, and they're learning together. They're learning about their Judaism together. So if you can imagine, who did we get as our speakers for this program? Busy people. And it's actually quite exciting how many people actually offered to speak because they're busy people, but they know how important and how it will do something for themselves. And I just want to mention, our cashier's program is called the Spiritual Spa. We always talk about self-care. And if I was to go to a spa, that would definitely be not indulgence, but I think it would be self-care. But we need spiritual self-care as well. And that's why we run these programs. So I want to compliment everyone for getting involve yourself and nourish your neshama, because that is also crucial self-care. We're going to move on to Tal, and Tal is going to be talking about the evolving identity of Ruth. Take it away. Go ahead.
My goodness, I'm blown away. Thank you so much. I want to give a shout out to Marcella Ansaldi. She's also from Venice, and she is part of our women's learning group in Italian, and she's decided to come on here tonight, and I think she's really happy being with all of you together. And Cecilia Handler, who actually lives in New York, but she's originally from Italy, and she often gives a share to us in Italy. Online has provided incredible opportunities for us in Italy, which is really, really quite amazing. So thank you so much for inviting me to address you tonight. I'm really, really honored. Something that's really interesting about Italy, conversion is a really hot topic here. People want to be converts, people want to be Jewish. In Italy, being Jewish is seen to be very cool, very interesting, very historical, right? The Jewish community of Rome has 2,000 years of uninterrupted Jewish history. So it's a bit of a hot button topic. I think when my mother named me Tal Ruth, I always used to say to her, really, Mom? You named me after the Shiksa daughter-in-law? And now I think none of us knew how much I would be defining and so interested in studying about identity. It's what led me really to build a school and to make it possible for anyone who's interested to have a Jewish education to have one. So let's delve into this really interesting evolving identity of Ruth. I will be brief. I'm going to do any sources, I'm going to do them in English. So, and she said, behold, your sister-in-law has returned to her nation and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. And Ruth said, do not harm me by requiring me to depart from you, to return from following you. For wherever you go, I will go. And whenever you lie, I will lie. Your nation is my nation, and your God is my God. However you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. So shall God do, and so shall he continue to do. That only death shall separate between me and you. It's in the first chapter of Ruth. So what's the first thing that we see about, and I would say I'm going to talk about the 5 steps of evolving identity. And that's Ruth's vision statement, isn't it? And even if you don't know how to get to something, it's always good to have a really big, bold, grand vision. That's the first step. Did Ruth and Orpah convert to Judaism prior to marrying Machlon and Kilion? There's various midrashim, many conversations, a lot of discussions, yes, no. And they married for themselves Moabite women, a teaching in the name of Rabbi Meir. They did not convert then, and they did not immerse them. They did not immerse them in the mikveh, and that comes from Ruth Rabbah. This reading may be indicated textually in several ways. When Ruth and Orpah initially resist returning to Moab, they declare in unison, for we will return with you to your people. Their implied disassociation from the Israelite nation may attest to the fact that at this point, neither Ruth nor Orpah regards Naomi's nation as her own. Subsequently, Ruth modifies this approach and chooses to attach herself to Naomi's nation. Your nation is my nation. So we know, I brought this because I just wanted to show that initially their identity had not evolved. So whether they had or they hadn't, or they were or they weren't, it's not a very clear identity before this story. Moreover, when Naomi recounts Orpah's eventual return to Moab in a bid to induce Ruth to follow suit, she notes that your sister-in-law has returned to her nation and to her gods. Orpah's uncomplicated return to her nation and to her gods may indicate that she had not severed her ties to them to begin with. In fact, Orpah has never made any grandiose declarations. So there we go back to the vision. Finally, Boaz's praise of Ruth, who has come to a nation which she did not know yesterday or the day before in the second chapter of Ruth, suggests that Ruth was not ultimately connected to the Jewish nation while she was married to Machlon in Moab. It is only after she accompanies Naomi on her return to Bethlehem that she officially joins the Jewish nation. There's many, many conversations among several commentaries. Did she, didn't she, was she, wasn't she? A Medrash offers a more complex approach to this question. Rav Pedal asked the son of Rav Yossi, when Ruth converted, why was she not given a new name? He said to him, no, so I have heard. She had another name, but when she married Machlon, they called her Ruth. Because when she was married to Machlon, she converted not long after. He said to him, but does it not say your God is my God? And if she converted before that, do we have all of this? He said to him, God forbid that Machlon would marry her if she was a Gentile. However, when she was married, she converted and she remained Jewish out of fear of her husband. She and Orpah in this matter, when their husbands died, Orpah returned to her corruptions and Ruth remained in her reasoning. When Ruth's husband died, Ruth cleaved to the Torah of her own volition. This message adopts somewhat of a middle ground, addressing the question of Ruth and Orpah's conversion and identity process. Like the Ibn Ezra, it is unwilling to conceive of the possibility that Machlon and Kilion, scions of this great Judean family, could have married Gentile women, and that's for another conversation, without converting them first. Nevertheless, it concedes that the conversion may have been insincere, and the only reason that the women retained their Judaism was because they feared their husbands. Thus, after the death of their husbands, it became necessary for them to reassess their loyalty. Point number 2, it will never work to change your identity if you do it for someone else. You have to own it. If Oprah and Ruth had previously converted, Orpah's return to her people indicates that her connection to the Jewish people was rather weak, while Ruth's was strong. If the women had not converted, Orpah's actions are entirely understandable. It is Ruth whose behavior is exceptional. We shall see that the majority of the Midrashim assume that the women do not convert prior to their marriage, enabling them to present Ruth's magnificent pronouncement of loyalty to Naomi as part of the process of her conversion. So I'm going to just refer to something that Yocheved said earlier about Ruth and Orpah and the kissing and cleaving. Ibn Ezra and a small number of Midrashim regard the young woman as Moabites who have made no commitment to the Jewish nation. And yet Ruth is adamant about her choice to remain with Naomi. Why? What distinguishes Ruth from Orpah, and what are her motivations? And they lifted up their voices and they cried again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth cleaved to her. It is interesting that the women initially distinguished themselves with an action rather than words. Orpah offers a kiss to her mother-in-law, a perfunctory gesture of farewell, while Ruth cleaves to her, Davkaba. Significantly, a Midrash regards these gestures as indicative of the very essence of each woman, labeling each woman according to her actions. The verb davak is used 3 more times to modify Ruth, as Boaz graciously instructs Ruth to cleave to her maidens. She excitedly repeats and accepts his offer. Boaz's offer may be considered a reward for Ruth's behavior vis-a-vis Naomi, and a recognition that this verb characterizes Ruth's persona. Ruth is a devuka, a woman who knows how to fasten herself to another person. That brings me to point number 3. She has made a very clear decision and she is steadfast. That would be something that's really important in the process of changing or evolving an identity. What does it mean to be a deveka? The word appears frequently in the context of man's relationship with God, while the verb davak nowhere else appears to describe the relationship between 2 named individuals. It is employed to portray the relationship between a man and his wife. Taken together, these examples suggest that this rare verb connotes an all-encompassing connection, a relationship in which one party embraces the totality of the other, utterly and completely. There's something illogical in this type of relationship, in which one's ego, one's awareness is subsumed by one's concern for the other. The disruption accurately depicts Ruth's relationship with Naomi. in which her decision to remain with her mother-in-law seems to undermine her own self-interest. Indeed, Ruth proffers no reason for her choice to go to Bethlehem rather than to return to her own family. She simply declares her resolute and unequivocal decision to remain steadfastly loyal to Naomi for the remainder of her life. Only death shall separate between me and you. Ruth's speech is firm and compelling and counters each attempt that Naomi made in her bid to dissuade her. Nevertheless, numerous midrashim propose another approach. Instead of love for Naomi, is it love for God that motivates Ruth's unselfish and courageous decision? This approach is derived textually from Ruth's declaration that she intends to embrace Naomi's nation and God as her own. Moreover, this is Boaz's assumption when he praises Ruth for having abandoned her family and come to Bethlehem to take refuge under God's wings. Some midrashim go so far as to deliberately downplay Ruth's devotion to Naomi. In one midrash, Ruth sidelines Naomi, informing her, "In any case, my intention is to convert. It is better to do so with your help and not with someone else's." From Ruth Rabbah. Another midrash explains that Ruth's desperate desire not to return to Moab stems from her recoil from the idolatry practiced in her former home. And Ruth began to plead with her, "I cannot return to my family and to the evil of the idolatry of my father's house." In a similar vein, rabbinic sources treat Ruth as the paradigmatic convert, and they derive several laws of conversion from this scenario. These midrashim read Ruth's magnificent pronouncement of loyalty to Naomi as part of the process of her conversion. In these readings, Ruth's monologue is rendered instead as a dialogue, in which the text records only Ruth's answers to Naomi's instructions regarding Jewish law. Yevamot 47b. This is, it's a monologue and it's very beautifully crafted, and I just want to read it to you. And Elazar said, "What does the text mean when it says, 'And she,' Naomi, 'saw that she, Ruth, was determined to go with her, and she ceased to speak with her. And Naomi said to her, we are forbidden to exit the Sabbath limits.' Ruth responds, 'Where you go, I will go.' Naomi says, 'We are forbidden privacy between a man and a woman who are not married.' Ruth responded, 'Where you lie, I will lie.' Naomi said, 'We have been commanded 613 commandments.' Ruth responds, 'Your nation is my nation.' Naomi, 'We are forbidden idolatry.' Ruth, 'And your God is my God.' Naomi, 4 capital punishments have been entrusted to the courts. Ruth, 'However you die, I will die.' Naomi, 2 graves have been entrusted to the courts. Ruth, 'And there I will be buried.' Immediately, and she, Naomi, saw that she, Ruth, was determined to go with her." Chazal's point is well made in this scenario. Ruth's unselfish decision and unwavering position emanate from a sincere desire to become a member of the Jewish people. This makes Ruth as an eminent figure in Jewish history and a sterling role model. Against all logic, against her own self-interest, this Moabite woman decides to forego her future because of her deep desire to cleave to God. That brings me to point number 4, be unwavering. Ruth's character and behavior vis-a-vis Naomi can serve as a model for acquiring commitment, love, and loyalty to Hashem. By modeling this behavior in the world of human finite relationships, Ruth educates by example, teaching us how to embrace God totally and utterly. And Midrash appears to advocate a similar idea. In other words, Ruth's behavior vis-a-vis her mother-in-law is an exemplary model for teaching Israel proper behavior towards God. Ruth demonstrated how one can vanquish one's own ego in pursuit of a relationship, even when it is illogical and against one's interest to do so. In this way, Ruth teaches man how to cleave to God. This is Ruth's attempt to persuade her mother-in-law that she intends to embrace Naomi's norms and culture wholeheartedly. This mention of the personal God of the nation of Israel underscores Ruth's active and total acceptance of the God of Israel, and it is at the same time a deliberate and conscious rejection of any other God. That brings me to my last point, commitment. So I just want to point out that in order to, and I see this with our school and with our students and with the families who are all part of this, what we call the school community, these really would be the 5 steps of moving through and evolving an identity. She has Ruth has moved through the steps, and the formula to an evolving identity would be, firstly, having a very bright, broad, massive, magnificent vision. Then you have to own it. You can't do it for someone else. You have to own it for yourself. Make a clear decision and be steadfast about it. Be unwavering and have constant commitment in order to achieve that. And I really thank you for the grand honor of inviting me to join you tonight, and to Ruthie for just being as marvelous as she is.
Thank you, Tal. I think we're all going to want to visit you in Venice when we're allowed to.
Come for Shabbos. Everybody's welcome.
Do you cook British or Italian?
I don't cook. My husband's the chef, and he does all kinds. He does Persian and Italian and whatever.
Our
You will not be
next-
hungry.
Our next speaker, we're going to go a little bit out of order because somebody's kids have woken up. That's why I'm speaking quickly. So thank you very, very much, Tal. And if anyone wants to know more about Tal's school, then be in touch with me. I'm happy to send you information. Very impressive. Okay, so our next speaker is a Dutch national, Audrey Dadon. Her husband is Moroccan. She's been living in London now for over a decade. And professionally, she works in the city as an executive search headhunter. She's a very proud mother of 2 little children who I think have woken up. So we're going to let her speak. But I just want to say that I find Audrey to be a very inspirational Jewish woman. And I think she's a role model to so many of us. And I'm very excited about having her speak about what we can learn, what 21st century woman can learn from Ruth. Okay, go on, let's hear.
You make me blush. I'm humbled by your introduction, and I'm not sure if I live up to it, but thank you so much. And thank you for letting me speak. As you can see, I have my 2 daughters here, which I hope they're going to let me speak. But I wanted to talk about Ruth in the 21st century. And ladies, we are so blessed to be part of a nation that promotes truly equal opportunities for men and for women. Because in a world where until today we see women everywhere in each part of society still striving for equality, our holy books contain plenty of examples of powerful women, and each story, each Megillah that has been written down, we are able to learn from throughout the generations. And that is why I wanted to look at Ruth and see what we can learn from her as a person and how she inspires us today. So looking at her character, of course, the first thing that stands out is her chesed. We learn from the Imam Loez that the entire Megillah was written just because of the kindness that she did to her mother-in-law. Her tzniut, the way she conducted herself amongst the harvesters. Her conviction to follow Naomi to an unknown country, to accept the entire Torah upon her. She must have had a huge strength of character, resilience to complete that journey, to withstand the suffering, the poverty, and above all, a complete lack of ego. She had the ability to accept and to leave her life of royalty behind. Now, there is so much more, and there's so much that we can learn from Ruth, and so many parts of her character that inspire us. But for the purpose of our gathering this evening and time, I wanted to home in on 2 aspects that perhaps surprised me personally the most. And that is that tzniut and lack of ego. Now, Ruth, in terms of tzniut, Ruth did not mingle with the other workers. She gleaned behind him. She did not purposefully make herself known, which is in such a stark contrast to our world, especially those of us working in a non-Jewish environment. What we see is that often the ones that have the most prominent voice, the ones that go play golf or socialize in the right circles and head to the pub after work, these are the ones that are being noticed and promoted. And it's such a temptation to feel the need to give in to that. But if we look at Ruth, we see that she was noticed by Boaz just because of her tzniut. For us, the level of tzniut, for us Jews, the level of tzniut is seen as a reflection of intelligence. It ensures that one is not distracted from the qualities and the values that achieve real and long-term respect. And the woman who is tanua, she's a woman who values herself, and her modesty is a reflection of that. The goal of tzniut is to help a woman control her emotions and let her inner self dominate her outer appearance. The powerful and inspiring women of our Torah, they were certainly not described by their appearance, only by their deeds. And also in the non-Jewish world, if we look at our female world leaders, CEOs, judges, we see that they hold dear to a strong set of values and they dress with self-respect. Us women, we have to realize that we will command true and long-lasting respect through our capabilities and our subtlety internally. Now then, low ego. What does it mean not having an ego? A person that lacks an ego is someone that realizes that they are part of a bigger whole. And while they contribute to that bigger picture, they know that they are not in charge. Sorry, there's Noga on the background. Let me just. So they realize that they cannot control everything, and they're able to accept that. So, 1 second. Nogi, Mama is near the. I'm sorry. Cannot expect a 3-year-old to be. So talking about ego, Ruth was able to place her trust in Naomi, in her Torah, and ultimately in Hashem. And because of that, she was able to accept that what Hashem sent her. She never gleaned more than she was allowed, and she did not eat more than she needed. And she was able to put her princess life to the past and follow Naomi into a life of material poverty. So how can we apply that to us? Each day that we recite Birkot HaShachar, we are reminded of how Hashem looks after us. We say, Baruch she'asa li kol tzarki. It speaks in the past tense. What does it mean? Hashem has already provided us with all of our needs. We are born with everything that we need to be successful and to reach our potential. We just need to tap into that inner resource, recognize our talents, and then use them. Everything that occurs in our life, we already have the tools to deal with it. And the second bracha that we, specifically as women, we say, Baruch she'asani kirtzono. It's such a reassurance for us. Every day we are reminded that Hashem has made us according to his will. We were already created complete. We are born complete. We don't need a Brit Milah. And I think it's an accurate reminder that as women, by following our part in the Torah, we will be able to achieve greatness in our way. We don't need to be like the men, be it in the sense that we need to emulate parts of their character or their mitzvot or socializing with them. We are able to find greatness within, simply by following the path that Hashem lays out for us. And if we look at Ruth, she's the ultimate proof that by being true to our inner essence, we will achieve truly important reward, as we have seen her becoming great-grandmother to David HaMelech. And please God, soon in our days, the Mashiach.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much, Audrey. I think you epitomize. You're saying, how old's your baby?
Nearly 7 weeks.
Okay, that's quite impressive. Very, very impressive. I also wanted to say that I'm going to put in a plug for Phone and Learn PAL, which is an organization where somebody can have somebody to learn with. And I've asked Audrey to come on board, and she blames it on me that she often is not able to participate in our spiritual spas. Do you want to say why?
Well, I have to start with a thank you first, and a thank you to Ruthie, first of all, for putting me in touch with introducing me to PAL. And second, I have to say thanks to my chavruta, which I invited her. I'm not sure if she is able to join. Yes, I see. Rina Dolland, who is a fantastic chavruta, and actually she's probably laughing because we've brainstormed this speech together, and there are certain parts that she has told me that I've integrated in this yours. So it was a match made in heaven.
I think you've done a great job. And I also think it's inspirational because, you know, it just shows that a person can be you know, big executive in the business world and not necessarily learning all that you're teaching your kids, you know, from, you know, day one, that you know, that you're able to achieve so much. So we should all, you know, it's an inspiration for all of us to make time for our Jewish growth and our development and our connection to Hashem and our connection to our neshama. So another plug for taking spiritual spa self-care whenever we can. Okay, our next speaker, another person I've known since before she was born, and that is Rebecca Gabai. I'm not going to take time to introduce her at length because I know that will embarrass her, but Rebecca is back in London from living in Israel for several years when her husband was learning, and she was doing lots of good things, and she got right into doing all sorts of, she's organizing shirim, and she's a busy ima, a mommy of 2 beautiful little girls. So I hope your kids are sleeping, but if not,
They are. Thank you.
okay.
Firstly, I want to thank.
Rebecca's subject is going to be, I think it's on the other page here, I'm sorry. It's the Yetzer Hara creeping into the Megillah.
Let's see, yeah. Firstly, thank you so much, Robertson Simon, for your firstly arranging this amazing evening and for all that you and your husband do for the community here, your devotion, and it's truly incredible what you do. So thank you. There's a law in the Torah from Parshas Vayera that says that a Moabite, you're not allowed to marry, and I know Robertson Simon touched on this a little bit, so I'm going to go through this very quickly, that you're not allowed to marry into Moab. That's a Torah source from Vayera. We're not allowed to marry into Moab. So we have a question over here. Why can't we marry into Moab if a Jew, if they convert, right? If a Moabite converts, how come they can't marry into the Jewish people? So the answer is because the essence of Moab, it was pretzis, was immorality. As Robertson Simon said, where does Moab come from? The birth of the nation of Moab comes from Lot. Lot was the nephew of Abraham Avinu, and he had with his daughter this child called Moab, and this daughter proclaimed to the world, and this child was born, saying, Me'av, this child is from my father. No busha, no embarrassment at all. And therefore the Torah doesn't allow us to associate, to marry into such an immoral nation. Yet we see that Ruth and Boaz come. Where does Ruth come from? Ruth comes from a Moab, she's a Moabite princess. So it looks to the naked eye externally that Ruth and Boaz marriage is forbidden marriage. What's going on over here? Yet Boaz understood the law of not marrying into Moab as Moavi v'lo ma'aves. A Moabite man can't marry into the Jewish nation. Yet a Moavis, a Moabite woman, it's permitted to join the Jewish nation. And therefore Ruth was permitted to join into the Jewish nation. Furthermore, we can see it from the Pasukim. If I read you quickly the Pasuk, Pasuk Kaf Aleph Perek Daled of Ruth, Obayez Holedas Oved. Boaz gives birth to Oved. Oved gives birth to Yishai, and Yishai gives birth to David. We see this amazing lineage that comes from this marriage of Ruth and Boaz. On a deeper level, we see something that's quite hard to comprehend over here. The Malbim, a commentary on Ruth and on Torah in general, brings down the Arizal that says that the reason why it had to look like this, that to the naked eye, Boaz and Ruth's marriage was forbidden, is because we had to trick the Yetzer Hara. There had to be mirma, there had to be deceit, it had to be in a disguised way. Why did we have to trick the Yetzer Hara? In order for such lofty neshamas to come down into the world, the neshamas of David HaMelech, and who comes from David HaMelech, and Mitzvah Hashem speaking in our days, David, Mashiach ben David is going to come from there. In order for this lineage, these great neshamas, these great sparks to come down into the world, and this is from the Arizal, so it's, it's a secret of the Torah, it's hard to comprehend. In order for such people to come down into the world, we need to trick the Yetzer Hara. We see this as well. If we look, and it also brings it in Ruth, we see this with Yehuda and Tamar, the relationship with Yehuda and Tamar. Yehuda has a child with Tamar, his daughter-in-law. We can't go into the whole story now, but again, it looks like it was a forbidden relationship. Yet we see again who comes from this relationship. Boaz is actually a descendant. It actually says in Ruth at the end that Boaz descends from Peretz, and Peretz is the child that Yehuda and Tamar had together. Again, the reason why it had to be done like this, that it had to look like it was forbidden, is in order, it had to look like it was pogrom, it was blemished, it wasn't a correct relationship, is in order, again, to trick the Yetzer Hara. And again, we see this in Ruth, where at the marriage of Boaz and Ruth, they bless Boaz and Ruth, they bless Boaz that your wife should be, and I'll read it to you in the Pesukim, your wife should be, all the people that were in the gate, they say that this woman that comes to you, to your house, should be like Rachel and Leah. Now we know Rachel and Leah are two sisters, and they marry Yaakov. Now, according to the Torah, two sisters are not allowed to marry, one husband. So it looks over here again. How can one of the others, right? The whole Jewish nation comes from the others. How can two sisters marry Yaakov? It looks again like it's, what's going on over here? Again, it looks awesome. However, we do know, a side point, that firstly, they didn't have the Torah yet, but we know that the others kept the Torah in Eretz Yisrael. And that's why it's brought down. That's why Rachel had to be nifter, had to die on the way to Eretz Yisrael in Beis Lechem. Because once he got to Eretz Yisrael, he wouldn't be able, it would be us, the others kept the Torah in Eretz Yisrael, and he wouldn't be able to be married to both Rachel and Leah, but that's a side point. But we see over here, the reason why he had to be married to Rachel and Leah is because, again, for the Shiftei Kaf, for the tribes to come down into the world, it only could be done through a disguised way. I want to finish off with I always like to try to bring something practical out of what I say, and a practical, but I think it's like more of a side point, a practical thing that I learned from here is that we can't take things at face value. Sometimes something can look so terrible, but really it's the most pure, and vice versa. There's a Gemara in Baba Basra that says that there was a sick child, and the father asked the sick child on his deathbed, what does, tell me what you see up there in Shemayim. I guess he's hovering between two worlds. What do you see up there in Shemayim? And the son says, I see an upside down world. I see the people in Olam Hazeh that are high up there, celebrities, wealthy, they're down below in Olam Haba. And vice versa. I see those that are like down below, seen as nothing in Olam Haba, are so up there in Olam Hazeh, are so up there in Olam Haba. The father responded to the son, son, you see a clear world. This is really what it is. This story brings out that we can't see things at face value. Sometimes something that looks, impure or forbidden is actually, obviously we have to be careful with this, is actually the most tahar, and also the opposite. I would like to thank you so very much for listening to me, and you should all have a wonderful Shavuos.
Thank you very, very much. Okay, we have two speakers left, and they're both really special, okay? So just hold on. I know the hour is getting late. The next one, we're going to go now to Calgary, Canada, and meet Miriam Carr, who is, she's written a little bit about herself, that she is a proud Jewish wife, a mommy, not a mummy, but a mommy. She is an educator, and she has a very interesting profession as well. She's a woman's body confidence and wellness coach. She is the creator of Beautiful Inside and Out, and she does sisterhood and coaching, and is passionate about helping people get through their eating disorders, more so eating disorder prevention, and helping women to love their bodies, love their food, and themselves from a place of health and happiness. And she's going to share with us talking about the Megillah and its connection to the upcoming Yom Tov of Shavuos. Okay, go for it. Hi,
Thank
Miriam.
you so much, Ruthie, for this opportunity. Thank you, amazing ladies. If anybody wants to get up and stretch, you've been sitting and learning Torah. You guys are amazing. So shake it out. Incredible. I've learned so much. Mamish. So I'm going to just jump right in. Hopefully this will be 5 minutes flat. So in learning about Megillas Rus, there are actually many reasons why we read it on Shavuos, the holiday we re-experience the giving of the Torah. And notice I didn't say celebrate, I said re-experience. And this is well known by the words of the Arizal, who says every Yom Tov, every holiday is not something we commemorate, marking something that happened in the past, but rather every year it's a new experience, a recurring and reliving of events. That means every year we have the opportunity to say, as the Jews did in the desert at Har Sinai, yes, we want the Torah, Nasev and Nishma, we will do and we will understand. We might not understand the fine print, but if it's from you, God, we want it. It's as good as, that's as good as it gets if it's from God. So we want what you have to offer, Hashem. So what does this acceptance, re-acceptance of the gift of Torah have to do with the reading of Megillas Rus? So I believe the answer to this question can change our lives. Let's learn how. First, let's get the facts straight. What is the Torah and what is the story of Rus? So Torah is God's gift to us. Life is complicated. God knows this. He made it that way for us to rise to our personal greatness. How do we do that exactly? He didn't leave us high and dry. He gave us the instruction manual, 613 ways of elevating yourself, bringing out the best in yourself, in others, and developing a relationship with a higher power, Hashem. Amazing. Thank you, Hashem. Now, the story of Rus. Obviously, there are so many layers and messages for us to take, as we've seen from the amazing ladies speaking to us today. But I'm going to focus on one tiny point that we're going to focus on here and see the connection. So it says in the Talmud in Rus Rabbah 2:14, it says, for what purpose was Megillas Rus written? To teach how great is the reward of those who do deeds of loving kindness. And who was it that performed such deeds of loving kindness, chesed? Of course, Rus. So Rus was a seemingly plain Jane from the plains of Moab, who somehow rises from a widowite Moabite to the stature of the great grandmother of the king of Israel, David HaMelech, no less. So what does that have to do with us and with the giving of the Torah? So the message is simple, but it's profound. You don't have to be born to royalty to become royalty. And because Rus blazed the way to royal greatness, lucky for us, we already are the great grandchildren of David HaMelech, King David. We already are that royalty. So 1 second, this is the secret, ladies. Rus, me, you, and every other Jew on this planet has an inner compass, an inner spiritual GPS called the neshama, the soul. Each of us have an inner calling, goals, dreams, and often messy life circumstances in our lives. How do we achieve personal greatness? How do we express the royalty that we are in our unique way through our deeds and personalities? Rus proves we have it in us. And on Shavuos is the time that we say, I can do this. God is giving me the gift of Torah again. And he believes in me. I'm here. I'm trying again, finding my way and finding the meaning of Torah in my life, learning and living it to the best of my ability. I'm counting towards Shavuos, growing baby step by baby step to step in to my personal greatness. But there's more, ladies. What is the prerequisite for receiving the Torah? We learned that at Har Sinai and Mount Sinai, the Jewish people were ke'ish echad, belev echad. They were like one man with one heart. The Jewish people are united. How can we be on the road to personal and national greatness and reaccept the Torah in our hearts and lives? When we accept our fellow Jew as part of us, that we are all one. no matter how we dress, no matter how we speak, no matter where we live or which shul we go to or don't go to. When we, practically speaking, how do we unite and be zocha and merit the gift of Torah? Ruth blazes the way with her personal example, and the Talmud backs her up. Great is the word who does kindness. To be one is to love is to give, and not just kindness, loving kindness, chesed, to be besimcha, with joy and not resentment. But that happens too, don't worry. If we see that we're giving with a bad taste in our mouth, it just means that we need to fill our vessel, take care of our needs too, so that we can give from a place of overflow, not just drip, drip, drip. So parenthetically, in the words of my revered teacher, Rebbetzin Heller Gottlieb, she said, don't be afraid of being a doormat. And I'm going to touch on that. Don't make yourself into a doormat. Take care of yourself so that you can be in a place to give. So Ruth, she plugged on after her mission and did so with kindness. So my question to you is, what is your mission? How do you march forth in the face of life itself, but with kindness, compassion, Torah values, seeking personal elevation, connection with others, in relationship with God? We all have a mission. We are all royalty. Ruth proves that we have it in us. And Shavuos gives us the Torah. It's the gift of the Torah which paves the way to our personal greatness. And we learn that kindness to oneself and to others is the only road that we can take to lead to the blessings Hashem wants to give us to us through the Torah on Shavuos. Thank you so much for listening and letting me take part in this event.
Very, very much. Thank you. Fantastic. And anybody that wants to be in touch with any of the speakers or get onto our Spiritual Spa mailing list or WhatsApp group, please be in touch. I've put my my contact in the chat. Okay, our final speaker for tonight, and thank you everyone for holding on. I know the hour is late. Is Natalie Ginsbury, and I really have to thank Narida. I don't know if you're still on, Narida, but Narida is who usually hosts our Spiritual Spa, and we're booking you in. Hopefully it will be in Yerushalayim for all of us. There should be shalom in the world, please Hashem. And that's how I met Natalie, and when I asked her to speak, she, again, busy people find the time, and she just overwhelmed us. So I'm going to, with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to Natalie, her topic is, would a rose by any other name smell as sweet? Okay, I'm gonna.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Hi. This
Australia.
is my yeah. Thank you, Rebbetzin Ruthie. This is my 5th year of being part of this learning program, and I think it's high time I share something personal with the group. So here goes. I don't like my Hebrew name. It's a collection of ch sounds, and I plain and simply don't like it. I spent my days at school trying to minimize the number of times it was used. And
We
then
get to know what it
year
is?
11,
You're going to tell us what it is?
perhaps. But then in year 11, I studied the play Romeo and Juliet. And in it, I read the famous line of a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. And I felt vindicated. There was my home run. I could put my Hebrew name into this metaphoric box, seal it, because I was going to smell as sweet, regardless of my Hebrew name. Well, that was fine until I listened to what Gina had to say tonight. And then I went, oh, I'm in trouble. And then I listened to what Raquel had to say tonight about the relationship between a mother and daughter, the intricacies and the kindness that is required in order to make it successful. And I thought, perhaps if we can pull together some of the themes of this evening and we can understand the correlation or the link between what Gina had to say and what Raquel had to say, then we can analyze whether or not Shakespeare got it right. And if by chance he got it wrong, then maybe that would spur me with the chizuk of the group to open that metaphoric box and let out the secret that is my Hebrew name. Not promising, but I'm going to try. So here goes. Let's look at this link. Let's see what we can do to conclude tonight's speeches. Rabbi Miller, in his Shabbat Shurim volumes, writes a very interesting essay on Pashas Emor. And he begins by bringing the following pasuk in Perek Chaf Gimel, pasuk Chaf Beis. He says, well, the Chumash says, "Uvakutzuchem et ketziratzuchem lo techale pa'at tzadka b'kutzrecha v'leket ketzircha lo techale le'ani v'lager tazavatam ani Hashem Elokeichem." When you reap the harvest of your land, do not gather all that grows in the corner of the field, nor should you gather the gleanings, the forgotten sheaves of your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am the Lord your God. Rashi on this pasuk says, Lelamdecha, this comes to teach us, Shekol hanoten leket shichur paya la'ani, kara'ui malin alav ki ilu bano to Beit HaMikdash, the hikriv karban achal b'tocha. That whoever leaves the gleanings in the corner of the field for the poor, it's as if they built the Beit HaMikdash and they brought karbonos in it. But what's the connection between leket, shichur paya, and karbonos? Well, the Rambam said there's an obvious connection. And he says, before Shavuos, it's the time where we bring the Karban HaOmer. It's also the time where the harvest seasons begin. So the Pasuk is coming to tell us that Hashem only wants a Karban from that portion of the harvest that we are allowed to bring. There's no point bringing a Kadosh Baruch Hu, a Karban HaOmer from ill-gotten gains, from that corner that's meant for the poor. But this discussion is brought down also in a Gemara in Yevamos, Daf Mem Zayin Amud Aleph, in which the Gemara asks, what kind of information should you share with a potential Ger Tzedek, with a potential convert, in order to try and dissuade them from joining the ranks of Am Yisrael? And the Gemara concludes that there are two types of mitzvahs you should tell them you'll be obligated to keep. The first is the grand mitzvahs, the very meritorious, huge, Herculean effort required mitzvahs that we are required to do, perhaps on a very infrequent basis. And then the Gemara says, please also tell a potential ger that they'll be required to keep more mundane, everyday mitzvahs that maybe don't require that much effort, but happen on a more consistent basis. Rabbi Dessler asks, why do we need the second category? Why should we tell a ger about the second category of mitzvahs? Surely, if someone's prepared to do the difficult, infrequent mitzvahs, the regular, everyday mitzvahs ought to be a piece of cake. One is superseded by the other. But Rabbi Dessler said, no, that's not the case. Because whilst it's very meritorious to do a grand mitzvah, often that can be generated by a momentary spiritual high. The momentum of trying to do this infrequent mitzvah can come on a more sporadic basis. But if you want to understand a person's true Yiras Shamayim, their true love of their fellow Jew, their true Midat HaChesed, look at what they do on a day-to-day regular basis. Look at what they do for mitzvahs like leket, shichur, and payah. Look whether or not when they harvest their field and during the harvest season on a daily basis, look whether they delve into the corner of the field just to grab a few bits of the gleanings or a few bits of the harvest that really should be for the poor, because that will tell you more about a person than a one-off huge grand mitzvah. Rabbi Miller says even more than looking at what someone does on a regular day-to-day basis, look at what they're prepared to give up when no one's looking, when it's not so grand. Have a look and see that. And for this, he points to the following example. He quotes an episode that happened in Perek Aleph of Megillas Ruth in Pasuk Chet, in which Naomi blesses both her daughter-in-laws. And she says, Ya'aseh Hashem imachem chesed, kasher asitem im hametim ve'imadi. May Hashem deal kindly with you, because you have dealt kindly with the dead, as in my deceased sons, and with me. The Medrash Ruth Rabbah asks, what is the kindness that Naomi is referring to? Because out of all the kind things that Ruth did, this is what she should be blessed for. And the Medrash says it was because both Ruth and Orpah said to their mother-in-law, do you know all those material possessions we were promised in the get? guess what? We forgo all of them. They're null and they're void. And since our husbands can't fulfill the conditions of the debt because they've passed on, our father-in-law can't do it because he's passed on, the obligation would have rested with Naomi. And when they said to her, guess what? We negate these obligations, is null and void. That was an act of chesed. But one second, we know that Naomi was exceedingly poor. In fact, when it says V'talachna baderach, that she went on her way from Moab to Beit Lechem, a lot of the Mefarshim say she went with bare feet. She couldn't even afford shoes. So what was Ruth really giving up? She knew her mother-in-law could pay her nothing, zilch, nada. So regardless of whether she held her mother-in-law to the conditions of the ksuba or she didn't, she was going to get zero, nothing. So what was so kind? But that was the true kindness, and that was Ruth's true midat chesed, because she knew she was going to get nothing. So when she told her mother-in-law, guess what? Those conditions in the ksuba, all the things that I'm entitled to, I negate. It's void. It's irrelevant. It's in the past. She did it to make Naomi feel better. She wasn't going to get anything either way. So the only difference was whether or not Naomi could sleep at night or not. And Naomi found that to be such a kind thing that she said, for this, Hashem should bless you with kindness. So now we can begin to understand that initial Rashi. What's the connection between leket, shichron payah, the mandated amount that farmers have to give to tzedakah, and karbanos? Well, if leket, shichron payah represent the small mitzvahs, the mitzvahs that indicate who we really are because they happen on a daily basis and they indicate a true commitment and a continuous commitment to Yiddishkeit. What Hashem is saying to us is when you come to Beis Hamikdash to give me a carbon, make sure it's your true personality that comes. I don't need 47 cows. I need sincerity. I need the real person with real kavanah to come and give that carbon. But what's the connection now between the kindness that Ruth showed her mother-in-law and the development of that relationship and the Hebrew name? Gina, here goes. If you look at the shorish of the word to negate, it's levater, vav, tov, reish. That's the exact same letters as in Ruth's Hebrew name of reish, vav, tov. So if you want to understand that true commitment to developing a relationship based on kindness, then you have to look no further than Ruth's Hebrew name, because it indicates she had midat chesed oozing from her, and she was prepared to share that kindness with her mother-in-law. So I think we've achieved the objectives. We've achieved the objectives of linking everything that Raquel said about the relationship between Ruth and her mother-in-law. We've upheld Gina's thesis that a Hebrew name is based on nevuah and says so much about who the person is. And so I'm left with a problem. My metaphoric box has gone out the window. So I guess I owe it to you to tell you my Hebrew name is, yeah, Kerry, I can see you're watching. It's Necha Chaya. Right, for 21 years, I've been looking to find some kind of meaning in the Hebrew name. And here's what I think it is. I didn't kick hard enough when I was in the womb. And I'm sorry, Mum, if you watch this later on at some point in time, but I clearly didn't kick very hard. But if someone has some inner meaning that they want to share with me to put me out of my misery, yeah, please message me privately. But if not, thank you everybody else for holding on for so long. And I look forward to seeing you next year, please God, in person. Have a good Yom Tov.
Thank you very much. That was great. I want to thank everyone. We had one more speaker, but she had to go to a meeting. She actually runs something called Drama Text, which is teaching drama. She's in South Africa right now. She does it in South Africa. She'll be returning to London, doing in London. So Shira has offered, I've actually asked her, I haven't gotten an answer back yet, but she may record her talk. She was going to actually be looking at Naomi and Naomi's essence. So the hour is late. I want to thank people for coming on. I also want to invite people to unmute yourselves, turn your cameras on. You know, this is one of the highlights of our year, having this event at Narita's house. don't think the rules are going to allow it unless we just have 6. I don't know. We could do 6 in shifts, Narita. But I want to thank everybody for participating, and I want to particularly thank the speakers for your inspiration and invigorating us. I personally feel uplifted, and I want to invite people to, to unmute. You can go home, whatever you'd like to do, but thank you very much. And have a wonderful, wonderful Yom Tov. Stay tuned for our next spiritual spa event. And also for anyone that is in London, Kesher has been active and running, but the return of the famous Kesher Kiddush begins on we're all night learning with cheesecake, and then the second day there'll be a grand famous Kesher Kiddush. Shul begins at 8:45, and you're all very welcome. 933 Finchley Road. Okay, good Yom Tov, and thank you.
Thank you, Ruthie.
Thank you.